Yeah, so how did you first become a part of all of this?
Well, I've been a fan of the vintage physique art, the 50s and 60s photographs. I discovered them in the early 90s, and at the turn of the millennium, I got my first computer, and playing around, I found all these sources that had these old images on their websites, or places like eBay, where back in 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's not quite so good now, there was a lot of this art was being sold over eBay. And there were email lists where you just, on different topics from, you know, crochet to, you know, whatever kinky sex act you were into, the whole gamut of human existence, there's a list up there to join other people and to discuss it, and, or in my case, to share pictures. These would have been pictures that other folks had found somewhere else online, or in many cases from their own collections that they would have taken the time to scan and to identify the models and the artists and try to date them, which is a very difficult thing to do. And we're just sharing these things. And I ended up forming one of these groups myself, which became very popular. It's still going on. And this, you know, geez, 10 years on now. 10 years. Anyway, and I became aware of John's work through my group, where we would share photographs. It would be scans of magazines or scans of actual photographs. And I had in my collection maybe a couple dozen that everyone had agreed belonged to John Palatinus, either because the magazine said it was his, or we could just pin down the style. You know, the stark black, stark white background, the simple costumes that he keeps repeating. You know, he loves the sailor suit because sailors wear the best pants, and that kind of thing. And a few years back, when I was working on a blog, just trying to keep spreading the word, you know, make it as accessible for people to find and not have to pay through websites. You know, no one wants to pay for websites anymore. I just posted 2 anonymous pictures. I didn't know the models' names, but I knew they were John's. And I just wrote on a little blurb beside it, because I try to spread information when I can about these things. You know, who took the photograph, who the model was, even though if it's a fake name or not. Just so we can, when you look at a photograph, it's neat to try to figure out who this person was. What's his name? What was he doing? Was he just rough trade off the streets, or was he a country boy, you know, trying to make it big in Hollywood? That was the big thing for the folks in AMG or Bruce of LA. You know, these people would come in thinking they're going to get signed to MGM, hello, Mr. Fly, and they would end up getting paid $10 to have their picture taken by Bob Miser. But trying to piece together a history is really important in this thing, because it's almost completely lost. So I wrote down that I knew it was by John Palatinus, a New York photographer around the early 60s, but I had nothing else to share. And through the whole circuitous route, a friend of John's saw the pictures and wrote to him, "John, someone has your pictures online." John saw them, and being the brave man that he is, you can't hold him back, he wrote me an email saying, "I'm John Palatinus, I'm alive and well in Palm Springs. If you want to talk about these times, I'd love to talk to you." And he gives me his phone number. Now, who shares personal information on the internet? Well, he does. And just by the sheerest chance, I lived 2 towns away from him. Who would have expected that? And so when we finally arranged to meet, I printed up what I had of his art, and I presented it to him, because he had told me in that first phone conversation how he had nothing left. It had all been stolen by the police when they raided his home and his studio. And when he told me that, I was freaking out. I was like, this is ridiculous, because I've seen his photographs. You know, the bulk of them that we have on display here are the ones he published under his own name. He was never hiding, unlike most photographers of the age who put up a studio name or just use their first name. It was always John Palatinus. And what got him in trouble was when he started selling nudes, or undraped photographs, as they used to say. He did use a second name. He used Courtney. It was a separate business. He wanted to keep it separate. But all he was doing was he was sending these brochures out to people who were already on his mailing list. There was no advertising in any magazines for the nudes. It was people that he knew had already bought from him. And someone, as always happens, either didn't like John or got upset and decided to turn him in. Said, oh, someone is passing off naked photographs through the mail. And in our day and age, these are, you couldn't call these pornography because, for one, I mean, there's nothing like an erection available. All it is a man reclining, showing off his entire body. There's nothing remotely distressing about it. But back in 1958, 1959, it was totally against the law, and people were just too uptight to even consider that someone might want to see this and might ask for it to be sent to him. So when I sent him, when we got together and I gave him those pictures, he looked at them and he said, oh, that's so-and-so. I remember taking that picture. Oh, that's so-and-so. I didn't like him at all. That's so-and-so. Oh, that was a great time. And that's so-and-so. That one got away from me. And he remembered it all 50 years later, and I was in awe. And we just kept meeting up and having a good time together. And because you can't, I mean, if you meet John Palatinus, you know this man, he loves everybody. He wants to talk to you. He wants to know your story. He wants to share his story. Exactly. Oh, he's great in Paris. He's kissing everybody on the street. But he knew Rick Castro in Hollywood, who owns his own gallery there, very funky gallery. And it was funny because I've met Rick Castro. I used to live in Hollywood, and I actually met Rick just shortly before I moved out here, and was at his first opening, and so we were acquaintances. So the idea came up to have a show there, and we didn't really have anything original. It all had to be recreated. So that's what the genesis of all of these stories were, was using the best material at our hands, whether it was a magazine scan, a few photographs that I had, roughing it. We created the first 18 images that we put in this group show. But Rick wanted to highlight John, so the show was John Palatinus, Tomorrow's Man. And we had a great time. He got to meet people who, some grew up with this kind of, grew up in the 50s, and this was the kind of magazine that they did hide under their beds. Or just so many young people in the 20s, 30s, who've never seen this kind of stuff before. And they come down and they go, oh my God, this stuff is really sexy. You think 50s, you think, ugh, ugly, you think bad Walt Disney movies. But these guys are full of sex. Some of them are funny, some of them are serious. And in the mid-50s when John was working, this was just totally blossoming across the country. There was, the major magazines, there was, like Tomorrow's Man was published monthly. It was about as straightforward as a magazine as you get of this variety. It had the muscle building tips, it had the sex tips. But the whole time, all the photographs are really meant for the gay underground. There's no denying this at all. But the magazines were sprouting up from some major publishing houses. Joe Weider, the man who promotes all the bodybuilding, the straight bodybuilding, got in on the game. He won't now, but all you have to do is look at his addresses in the magazines, and you know who published Muscle Boy, and Demigods, and Young Physique, and Body Beautiful, and Adonis. Well, hi Joe. He made money on it while he could, and then the market imploded, and he ditched it right away. But that was the big guys, and there was little guys. So if you were taking pictures, you could, if you persevered, you could get it published. And John, from the Midwest and then New York, he got published right away and regularly. And he was building up a good body of work, and his work was getting better, daily. I mean, it's amazing. You just see, the arc from, just posing, his friends posing on the beach, yeah, we can all do that, but it doesn't really, it's fun. But to the whole arrangement of the model and the props and everything else in the studio, the lighting, it takes work. It's not something you just snap. And he was getting so good. And unfortunately, the nudes, which a lot of other artists were doing, did him in. And I think that's just terrible that as he had his first major star who was appearing in several of the magazines. He was really getting a name out for himself, and it just shut down. And most of the artists of the Golden Age, I mean, even someone like Bruce of LA, who, you know, is probably the most famous name, I think. I mean, AMG is there too, but Bruce had the class of all of them, though he did his dirty stuff too. Anyway, no one knows anything about Bruce Bellis. I don't know where his friends are. I don't know where his relatives are. I don't know who owns his stuff, if anybody owns his stuff. He is totally lost to history. We knew he was a teacher at one point. He came to the West Coast, took photographs, unfortunately died at a young age, relatively, 50s, you know, young age. And then that was it. It's like, that's terrible that people like this who are creating wonderful art have totally disappeared from the face of the earth from all human reckoning, except for a few pieces that you can still pop up once in a while. So having a chance to work with John and Bernd and getting these shows together and spreading this word out to people that, you know, yeah, you can turn on your computer any day and you can find nasty pictures, but you know, there's more to it than just that. I mean, it all came from somewhere. Someone started taking nasty pictures, and nasty pictures were being taken from 1865, okay? Believe me, this is nothing new. But trying to create a style, trying to create an aesthetic, trying to create, you know, a real body of work, he was accomplishing that, and then it just disappeared. His lawyer said, John, you know, you could fight this if you really wanted to, but it's going to get messy. He was doing it as a hobby. It was fun. It made him some cash on the side, but he had his own career. So he took his lawyer's word, and I totally understand, because he went through hell that couple of years before everything was finally settled. I mean, think about it. You know, your name's in the papers. He probably lost his job then. The people who got arrested with him probably lost their jobs. You know, they print your names, address, everything else. You know, there's no, well, even today, there's no presumed innocence. You know, and they use the most lurid things. You know, porn peddlers and everything else. Well, 100,000 names confiscated. It even included one woman on the list. Oh, a lady might want to look at a naked man. Oh, that's not good. I like the fact that John is here, that he kind of just let it all slide for 50-odd years. You know, some of his friends knew about it, that he had taken some photographs and it didn't work out right, but he never talked about it much. It was a piece of his life. But when we connected and he saw them again, and he's really embraced it again. He had a great time. You know, he really enjoyed it. He enjoyed meeting the people then as he does now, and I think it's fantastic that he really wants the world, really, to see this again.
And do you? Do you want the world to see it? Obviously.
Yes, I think it's fantastic. I think I've been to a couple of the shows in Europe, and meeting the people there, even though they're not Americans, our entire culture is alien to them, even though we try to export everywhere we go. They learn about these stories, they see these pictures, they meet John, they go, oh my God, this is so wonderful. I can't believe that this kind of stuff disappeared. And it resonates with anyone you meet anywhere, really, because just on the level of being gay art, whether you wanted to call it, that's how it's always going to be discussed. It's going to be gay art. We can't avoid, you have to pigeonhole everything, Of course, I just lost my train of thought.
It's okay. You're talking a little bit before about the difference between his work and others. You could see it as being recognizable. Mm-hmm. How would you compare it? Like, what I'm trying to achieve is to educate people that he is just as good as a Mapplethorpe, a Miser, a Bianchi, whoever it is you're saying these are the man. To me, he's already proven it. It's done. The body of work is here. So for you, what does it mean to you, and to be a part and help promote this person as being an artist, a fine artist? Should I rephrase?
I think his work stands on its own as portraiture. I mean, he mostly did full-length figures, even though we laugh at him for getting the toes cut off. And he laughs back, so it's okay. And I think it's totally a snapshot of the times, but it's still, just saying that, all these men could walk in here right now and they would totally be of today. I mean, hairstyles come and go, but these guys, they are totally timeless. And real art, fine art, stands the test of time. Fads come and go, but eventually someone's going to say, I don't care if Impressionism is out this year, this Monet is fantastic. Well, I think that Matt Carroll standing there holding that belt and looking as mean as he can is a timeless piece of work. Now, whether you think that's an S&M piece or you just think he's about to, you realize he's just posing because that's what the photographer said, I think that's just an amazing piece of work. And I think 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, hopefully more than that, people are still going to look at that and go, wow, that is really, it was staged correctly, it was lit beautifully, and it's powerful. It's not just someone laying on the floor diddling himself, which is unfortunately what a lot of gay photography is these days. I mean, I'm not saying that's all it is. There are certainly many photographers out there who are doing very beautiful, beautiful work, and it's all, I mean, it is sensual, it is erotic, it is not porn. Now, I love porn. I can say that very proudly because porn definitely has its place in everyone's life, no matter what you're going to say to your friends. But there's also a nice place in your heart, I think, for aesthetic beauty, and John definitely created some of that.
Any questions? The last question is, you made a lot of references to you going into it and all this good stuff. Yeah, obviously, it's something very personal to you. What is it about it? Because before you even knew him, knew the work, you saw just some images that struck something in you. What is that?
I really don't know. I don't know why I've been so fascinated with this whole era of photography. I mean, for 20 odd years now, I guess, that's a little more than half my life. I found it, and I think, the folks, the main names everyone who discovers this hobby is Bruce of LA and Bob Miser of Athletic Model Guild, because they were just produce so much huge amounts of work. And it's fun. It's, it's goofy. That's the first thing you notice. But then you dig into their work and you find out that it is just beautiful. They found these beautiful young men. Not necessarily, sometimes even almost middle-aged men once in a while. But, okay, 20 years old, that was the prime age. And they would pose them, they would light them, they would backdrop them, and they would just make a beautiful piece of work, a beautiful piece of art.
So it's about your fantasy. You're connecting to that vision.
I'm seeing that vision. I'm seeing, the ideal, of someone in his peak physical form being highlighted, being given a chance to show it off. Because that was all it was too in that day was, you'd be down in the gym pumping iron, in very basic gyms back then, let me tell you. And what do? You want to show it off. So you need your picture taken. And these guys were in the heart of Hollywood. You just went down and knocked on the door. They said, sure, come on, I'll take a picture. They'd pass them off a few proof shots and give them some photos they could show to their moms and get $10 or whatever it was. One of the models in an interview said, we'd go down, if we needed a case of beer, we'd go down to Bob's and get our picture taken. They'd walk out $10 to get a case of beer. They may not have thought much about it, but they were beautiful. They showed it off, and it lasts. It's there forever. I mean, and it's you know, it's not a painting by Picasso. It's not a painting by well, whoever did portraits or whatever. It's a photograph, and people think photographs, oh, you just snapped it. You know, that didn't take any talent, didn't take any thinking about, and that is so wrong. It is the snapping of the lens is the easiest part. It is getting the model in the correct posture, getting the lights right. Do I want a costume? Do I not want a costume? I saw this in person when John was hosting Rick Castro's Kinky Camera Club. I was there taking my photographs along with 4 other photographers. And John walked into that room with the model who was already there, who was all set to do whatever everyone wanted. And John just took complete control of that room. He said, move this here, move this light there, bring this over here. Stand here, lift your arm up this way, move your leg this way. He hadn't done this in 50 years, and it came to him instantly. And Rick comes up to me, and he goes, this is history, I can't believe this. And Rick Castro is an amazing artist in his own right. I mean, he is incredible. And he is a totally lovely man, and he was in awe watching John move this model around. So that anyone who was taking a picture that day was taking a John Palatinus photograph. Just plain and simple, because his emotion, his skill was what was going on underneath those lights with that model reacting to what John said. It was phenomenal. It was 2 hours I'll never forget for the rest of my life. And I think everyone else there felt the same way, because there's no one left doing this, and there's no one who understands how it worked 50 years ago. And just that we've had some great times. That first opening was amazing. Just seeing all those people come in who have, you know, they read an article in the paper, and, you know, the Frontiers magazine, and they were like, oh, this is weird, let's go see what this is. And when Rick had that second afternoon there, more people came afterwards. They wanted to meet him, they have a little more one-on-one, and they wanted to learn more about the story, because there's no way you can look it up. You know, the few books that have come out are mostly out of print, and you're not going to find them in a library. You know, unless you happen to have an older friend who might have had a copy, you're out of luck trying to find history on this stuff. I mean, the internet is still a great source. I mean, you know, look for my blog, it's right there. Anyway, no.
What is the name of your blog? Tell me your name and the name of your blog.
I'm Alan Harmon, and my blog is v-m-p.blogspot.com. VMP, Vintage Male Physique. Just type in Vintage Male Physique, you'll find me. But it's fun to learn about different types of people, different types of eras, different, you know, history. History is fascinating, and when you can meet someone who lived history, you know, who lived 50 years ago, talk to them if you can. I mean, it sounds stupid. That's what everyone says, you know, in high school and everything. Oh, I don't want to talk to no old people. Let me tell you, at our last opening in Berlin, we met this young man. Well, I say young, he's 40 years old, but I feel older than he is. Anyway, he saw an ad in the paper. He came in. He sought me out. He says, what is all this? And I told him what it was. And we spent that afternoon, me and my partner, who is a bit older than I am, we spent talking and explaining to him and showing him around and meeting John, of course. And he came back that evening again and spent the entire evening with us. And he told me later he had never had a real conversation with anybody older than he was. And here he was having a conversation with my partner who was in his 70s, and he realized this man knows so much about the world, knows, you know, has been everywhere, has done everything, and is lively and wants to share it with you. And there's so many people like that out there in the world, whether they're artists or they're just someone living next door. But no one ever really wants to talk to old people. And I've been fortunate in my life to have met an awful lot of, I won't say old people, I'm going to say more mature people. Because, let's be nice to everybody, okay? These guys are fantastic and storytellers, and they want you to learn things, and God knows, Mr. Palatinus has traveled the world. He's had so many experiences. Learning from him has been, a rush. I mean, and every day we get together, something new comes out, and it's just been a wild ride.
I'm just about out of tape.
Oh, there you go.